I stood there in the middle of the church, clutching a blood-stained rosary, realizing I'd just witnessed something that would change my life forever. The storm outside raged with a ferocity I'd never seen, lightning splitting the sky like divine swords, and before me, an 87-year-old woman smiled with a serenity that defied all human logic. Her hands still bled from the wounds I myself had inflicted, but her eyes shone with a light I could only describe as supernatural, and it was in that moment, on that stormy night, that I understood what had just happened couldn't be explained by science, medicine, or any earthly knowledge I possessed. My name is David Miller. I'm 45, and for over 2 decades I was the pastor of a small evangelical church in the town of Havenwood, nestled in the heart of the countryside. I always considered myself a man of faith, but also a rational man. I believed in miracles, yes, but always with a healthy dose of skepticism. You know, always searching for logical explanations for the phenomena around me, until that night, until the moment I witnessed something that not only challenged my logic, but completely transformed my understanding of faith, forgiveness, and the inexplicable power that dwells among us. It all started a few months ago, on a Sunday afternoon like any other. The church was full, as it always was on Sundays. Our community was small, but close-knit. About 200 people gathered weekly to hear the word and share their joys and sorrows. The church windows were open during the service, letting in the gentle late-afternoon breeze so characteristic of our little town. The sound of hymns echoed down Main Street, blending with the everyday noises of the simple lives we led there. It was a seemingly ordinary day, until she appeared. Eleanor Vance, an 87-year-old woman, her snow-white hair pulled back in a simple bun, always dressed in dark clothes and carrying an old rosary that, she said, had belonged to her great-grandmother. Eleanor was known by everyone in town as the town saint, not because she performed miracles or had any special gift, but because of the way she lived. Her kindness was genuine, her patience infinite, and her faith so pure it was infectious. She had lost her husband 15 years ago, had no children, and lived alone in a simple little house on the outskirts of town. But I never saw her complain about anything, never. That particular Sunday, however, something was different about her. I was mid-sermon, speaking about forgiveness and reconciliation, when I noticed Eleanor rise from the pew where she always sat, in the third row on the right. She walked slowly, with those careful steps that age imposes, but there was something in her expression that caught my attention. Her eyes were teary, and she was murmuring words I couldn't understand from the pulpit. The rosary in her hands trembled slightly, and she pressed it to her chest as if it were a shield. At first I thought she might be unwell. After all, she was an elderly woman, and the afternoon heat was rather intense. But when she reached the center of the nave, right in front of the altar, and raised the rosary above her head, I knew something more was happening. Her voice, normally soft and low, echoed through the church with a force that surprised me. Evil is among us. I can feel it. A restless murmur ran through the congregation. Some people nervously laughed. Others exchanged confused glances. Some whispered comments about the old lady's age, suggesting she might be confused or disoriented. But I felt something different. A chill ran down my spine, and for a moment, something I couldn't name took hold of me. I descended from the pulpit and walked towards her. The atmosphere was tense, charged with an energy I had never felt before. When I approached and looked into Eleanor's eyes, I saw something that deeply disturbed me: fear. But not fear of me or the situation. It was as if she were seeing something I couldn't see, as if she were witnessing a reality that escaped my perception. "Eleanor," I said, trying to remain calm, "are you all right? Perhaps you should sit down." She slowly shook her head, without taking her eyes off mine. "Pastor David, the rosary, it's pulsating, like a heart. I've never felt this before in all these years." And that's when something inexplicable happened. In a split second, a sudden and irrational rage took hold of me. It was as if something inside me had awakened, something I didn't recognize as my own. Without thinking, without considering the consequences, I reached out and grabbed the rosary forcefully, trying to pull it from her hands. "Eleanor, stop this. You're disrupting the service." the beads of the rosary tangled in her frail fingers. I pulled with a brutality that wasn't characteristic of me, driven by an impulse I still can't fully explain. There was a sharp snap, a cry of pain, and then the rosary broke. But along with the rosary, part of Eleanor's skin, blood flowed between her fingers, dripping onto the church floor. The church fell completely silent. Horrified, the congregants watched as the 87-year-old woman fell to her knees, her tears mixing with the blood. In that instant, something shifted within me. The rage vanished as suddenly as it had arrived, replaced by a profound horror at what I had done. My vision blurred. I felt a severe dizziness, and the floor seemed to sway beneath my feet. But what completely paralyzed me was Eleanor's reaction. She smiled, a serene, calm, almost merciful smile. "Don't worry, son, you didn't do that. But he knows he's lost." These words echoed in my mind for days, weeks, months. At first I tried to ignore them, to convince myself it had been just a moment of stress, an overreaction to an unusual situation. But the truth is, from that day on, my life changed completely. My dreams turned into constant nightmares. I saw shadows moving along the walls of my room, heard incomprehensible whispers in the dead of night. The pulpit, which had always been my place of comfort and inspiration, became a space of anguish. Every sermon was torment, every prayer a struggle against an invisible force that seemed to want to suffocate me. The congregation started noticing changes in me. My wife, Sandra, expressed constant concern. I was more irritable, more distant, as if something was corroding my soul from within. And maybe it was. If you're following this story, and it's touching your heart in some way, consider subscribing to the channel to continue receiving reports like this. Real stories of people who have gone through transformative experiences and found hope in the most difficult moments. Your participation helps us continue sharing these testimonies that can inspire and strengthen others, desperate to find answers, and especially to ask forgiveness for what I had done. I searched for Eleanor all over town. I visited her house several times, but she wasn't there. I asked the neighbors, the shopkeepers, everyone who knew her. The answers were contradictory and confusing. Some said she had traveled inland to visit distant relatives. Others swore they had seen her walking through the fields surrounding the town, as if she were searching for something. An elderly woman from the central market told me she had seen Eleanor one morning very early, carrying a small suitcase and walking towards the road that led to the mountains. She seemed determined, the woman said, as if she knew exactly where she was going. During these weeks of searching, my mental state worsened considerably. The shadows I saw at night seemed sharper, closer. The whispers became more audible, although I still couldn't understand what they were saying. There were times when I felt as if something was literally trying to take control of my thoughts, my actions. Sandra suggested I seek medical help, perhaps a psychologist or psychiatrist. I agreed, but deep down I knew that what was happening to me transcended any conventional scientific explanation. It wasn't depression, it wasn't stress, it wasn't any known mental disorder. It was something deeper, older. Weeks turned into a month, then 2, and Eleanor remained missing. It was on a stormy night, exactly 2 months and 3 days after the incident, that everything changed definitively. Our town was facing the worst storm in decades. The winds blew with terrifying force. The rain fell in torrents that seemed to want to sweep everything off the map. The power had been cut off in almost the entire town, and I was in the church, alone, trying to find some solace in prayer. I had lit some candles on the altar and was kneeling before the cross, begging for answers, for peace, for any sign that I wasn't going crazy, when I heard a deafening crash. The main door of the church burst open with tremendous violence, as if it had been pushed by a superhuman force, and there she was, Eleanor. Soaked by the rain, her clothes torn and dirty with earth, but standing. Her white hair was loose and wet, her bare feet leaving mud tracks on the church floor. But what caught my attention most were her hands. She was holding the rosary, the same rosary that had broken 2 months before, but now it was mended, the beads joined by a thread that seemed to shine with its own light. "The time has come, Pastor David." Her voice echoed through the church with an authority I had never heard before. The candles I had lit began to flicker violently, as if an invisible force was playing with their flames. The air became dense, charged with an energy that made my hair stand on end. Eleanor walked slowly towards me, her bare feet making no noise on the stone floor. When she got close to me, I could see her eyes clearly. They shone with a light that wasn't of this world. It wasn't frightening, it was comforting, as if all the wisdom of the universe were concentrated in that gaze of an 87-year-old woman. "I know what you've been going through," she said, extending one of her hands towards me. "I know about the torment, the shadows, the whispers. I know because I went through it too." My voice came out trembling. "Eleanor, I need to ask forgiveness. What I did was unforgivable. I hurt you." She shook her head gently. "My son, you didn't do anything. It was that which was inside you, something that doesn't belong to you, that isn't you. But now," she raised the mended rosary, "now we're going to free you." It was then that she began to tell me a story that would forever change my understanding of faith, of good and evil, of forces that exist beyond our normal perception. During the 2 months she had been missing, Eleanor had made a pilgrimage. Not an ordinary pilgrimage, but a spiritual journey that took her to places that few knew and even fewer dared to visit. She told me that on the night of the incident, when she arrived home with her hands wounded and the rosary broken, she had a dream, or a vision. She didn't know quite how to define it. In the dream, an elderly woman, dressed in antique clothing, appeared to her. The woman claimed to be her great-grandmother, the original owner of the rosary, and she revealed a secret that had been kept for generations. The rosary wasn't just an ordinary prayer object. It had been blessed by a holy priest over 100 years ago, specifically to protect against a curse that plagued that region. "A curse?" I asked, still trying to process everything. Eleanor nodded gravely. "Yes, son. A long time ago, a man who called himself a pastor made a dark pact. He craved power, he wanted a large and faithful congregation, and he got what he wanted, but the price was terrible. The entity he made a pact with remained tied to that church, that place, seeking out hosts over the years." My blood ran cold. "And you're saying that this entity was trying to take control of you?" "Yes. It chooses spiritual leaders because through them it can influence many people, but it underestimated one thing: the power of true faith and genuine sacrifice." Eleanor explained that, during her pilgrimage, she visited 7 sacred sites, 7 mountains where abandoned chapels stood, 7 rivers that flowed through blessed lands, 7 stones that marked the prayer sites of ancient saints. In each place she prayed intensely, fasted, and allowed her wounded hands to bleed onto the broken rosary. "The blood shed in sacrifice for faith," she said, "holds a power that these entities can't withstand. It's not magic, it's not superstition, it's pure surrender, pure love." And that's what mended, not only the rosary, but also broke the connection that this thing had with you. When she finished speaking, I felt as if an immense weight had been lifted from my shoulders. The constant dizziness that had plagued me for months vanished instantly. The air around me felt lighter, purer. The shadows I'd seen in the corners of the church simply dissipated, as if they had never existed. Eleanor took my hand and placed the mended rosary in it. "Now it's yours," she said. "But remember, the true power isn't in the object. It's in the faith you carry in your heart. It's in your willingness to sacrifice for others, to be a true servant, not a lord." At that moment, I wept as I hadn't wept since childhood. Tears of relief, of gratitude, of understanding. I understood that everything, the inexplicable rage, the torment, the nightmares, hadn't just been a test, but a purification, a way to show me how far I had strayed from true Christian values, how much I had begun to see myself as special, as superior to my parishioners. The storm outside gradually began to subside. The candles stopped flickering, and their flames stabilized, softly illuminating the church's interior. Eleanor smiled once more, that serene smile I had seen on the day of the incident. "Now you understand," she said. "The true spiritual battle isn't against external demons. It's against the pride, the arrogance, the lust for power that exists within each of us. When we open ourselves to these weaknesses, we become vulnerable to influences we cannot comprehend." She stood to leave, but I held her arm. "Eleanor, please, don't go yet. I have so many questions." She shook her head gently. "My son, some answers can only be found through experience. You already have everything you need. You have faith, you have love, you have the humility that is only gained through suffering. Use these gifts to serve, not to be served." Before leaving, she left me a small piece of paper, handwritten in a shaky but clear script. "Faith isn't in the altar. It's in what you choose to be when no one is watching. Keep this." And then she departed, walking slowly, in the now fading rain, until she disappeared into the darkness of the night. In the days that followed, my life changed completely. The anguish, the torment, the feeling of being watched by something evil, all of it vanished completely. But more than that, my way of ministering transformed radically. I completely abandoned the authoritarian preaching style I had developed over the years. I set aside the posture of a man of God, who knows all the answers. The pulpit, which had once been my throne, became simply a place from where I shared my own doubts, fears, and learnings. The congregation noticed the change immediately. Some were confused at first, accustomed as they were to my old stricter demeanor, but most realized that something profound had changed, and they responded to this change with more openness, more participation, more genuineness in their own faith journeys. Sandra, my wife, said it was as if I had returned to the person she had fallen in love with 20 years earlier. "You had become distant, authoritarian, as if you were always acting a part," she told me. "Now you're human again. As for the mended rosary, I keep it at home, on a small altar I set up in my office, not as a charm or magic object, but as a constant reminder that true spiritual strength comes from humility, sacrifice, and genuine love for others." Eleanor. She disappeared again after that night, but this time it was different. Some townsfolk said they had seen her a few times, always helping people in need. Once she appeared at the home of a family that was starving, bringing them groceries. Another time, she was seen alongside a man who had lost his job, helping him find a new opportunity. But no one can locate her when they search directly. It's as if she appears only when she is truly needed, when someone desperately needs help or guidance. I saw her twice more after that stormy night. The first time was at the funeral of a young man from our community who had died in a car accident. I was struggling to find words of comfort for the boy's parents when I saw Eleanor in the back of the church. She discreetly nodded to me, and somehow, I felt a sense of peace wash over the room. The right words came naturally, and I was able to offer the comfort that family needed. The second time was just 2 weeks ago. A child in the community was gravely ill, and the doctors had exhausted all treatment options. The parents sought me out, desperate, asking me to pray for their daughter. When I arrived at the hospital, Eleanor was there, sitting in a chair in the hallway, silently praying with the original rosary in her hands. Apparently, she had another one, identical to the one she gave me. She smiled when she saw me, but didn't say anything. She just kept praying. I joined her, and we sat there for hours, in silence, just praying together. The next morning, the doctors announced that the child's condition had inexplicably improved. It wasn't a miracle in the dramatic sense of the word, but a recovery they couldn't medically explain. When I turned to thank Eleanor, she had vanished again. Today, 3 years after that life-changing stormy night, I can say with certainty that I witnessed something that transcends our normal understanding of reality. I don't know if Eleanor is an ordinary person with extraordinary faith, or if there's something more to her that I can't comprehend. Honestly, I don't care much for those classifications. What I do know is that she taught me that the true spiritual battle takes place within ourselves, that the most dangerous evil isn't the one that comes from outside, but the one we cultivate through our pride, our lust for power, our refusal to acknowledge our own weaknesses and limitations. The mended rosary remains on my desk, stained with the blood of a woman who chose to sacrifice herself to save someone who had hurt her. Every morning, when I look at it, I remember that true faith isn't about performing spectacular miracles or impressing crowds with eloquent speeches. True faith is in the willingness to bleed for others. It's in the humility to acknowledge that we don't have all the answers. It's in the courage to confront our own inner darkness and choose the light, even when it means giving up the power, the position, the recognition that we value so highly. If you've come this far in this story, it's perhaps because you're also facing your own inner battles. Maybe you also feel that something is trying to take control of your life, your thoughts, your actions. I want you to know that you're not alone, and that however impossible it may seem, there's always a way out. The way out might come through a simple, humble person, like Eleanor. It might come through an act of sacrifice, a moment of genuine humility, a courageous choice to put others before ourselves. What I've learned is that true miracles aren't always dramatic or visually impressive. Sometimes, the greatest miracle is the silent transformation that happens in a person's heart. It's the gradual change that leads us from arrogance to humility, from selfishness to love, from despair to hope. And if an 87-year-old woman, carrying a mended blood-stained rosary, could break a centuries-old curse through the sheer force of her faith and sacrifice, imagine what each of us can do when we choose to truly love, genuinely serve, and completely forgive. This is my story, this is my experience, and I share it not to convince anyone of anything, but to offer hope to those who, like me, sometimes feel lost in their own inner darkness. The light exists, it always has, and it's closer to us than we imagine. Today, when I lead services, there's no longer authority in my voice. There's invitation. There are no longer absolute certainties in my words. There are honest questions, and there's no longer distance between me and the congregation. There's true fellowship, because I've learned that we're not shepherds and sheep. We're all sheep, walking together, helping each other find our way back home. And sometimes, the most wounded, the most humble, the simplest sheep are the ones who know the way best. Thank you, Eleanor, wherever you are. Thank you for saving me from myself. Thank you for teaching me that true strength lies in weakness, that true leadership lies in service, and that true power lies in love that expects nothing in return. And thank you for showing me that, even in our darkest moments, when we feel completely lost, there's always someone willing to bleed for us, to fight for us, to not give up on us. This is the miracle I witnessed. This is the testimony I share. And this is the hope I offer to all who, like me, have felt imprisoned by their own darkness. You are not alone. The light exists, and it's closer than you think.